So Commissioner Clerk, how are you looking for a quorum?
We do have a quorum.
All right, thank you very much. Then we'll begin. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Riverside County Transportation Commission's Budget and Implementation Committee meeting for Monday, April 25th, 2022. Before I go any farther, I do want to cover just a couple of housekeeping remarks. Again, thank everyone for participating in this remote meeting, and we'll do our best to facilitate a smooth meeting with public participation. So I would ask that you please silence your communication devices, such as your cell or desk phone. So that way we can try to minimize feedback or any interruptions during the meeting. And just a reminder that we will be taking public comments on items not on the agenda here in just a moment. But as we call each item, we will also allow public comment with each item. So, and if you are watching us on Zoom and you're not necessarily familiar with Zoom, if you want to make a comment on your screen, you please use the raise hand button. If you're using a smartphone, you may need to tap your screen, look for the more option, and then the raised hand button. And if you're using a phone line only, you would dial *9 on your keypad to let us know that you want to make a comment. So with that, we'll go ahead and move back to the meeting, and I'll ask for a roll call.
Good morning. District 3, Beaumont.
Here.
Banning. Calamasa.
Here.
Canyon Lake.
Here.
Cathedral City.
Here.
Coachella.
Here.
Desert Hot Springs. Lake Elsinore.
Here.
Marietta. Palm Desert.
Here.
Palm Springs.
Present.
San Jacinto. Riverside.
Here.
Wildemar.
Then Benoit here.
Thank you. We do have a quorum.
Thank you so much. All right, the next item is the Pledge of Allegiance. If I could please ask Commissioner McGee to lead us in the pledge.
Join me in our salute to the flag. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you so much. Okay, the next item on our agenda is the time for public comments. This would be the time if there are any public comments for items that are not listed on our agenda. Just a reminder that under the Brown Act, the board should not take action or discuss matters raised during public comment portion of the agenda on items that are not listed on the agenda. And we would ask each speaker to limit themselves to 3 minutes or less. I'll ask the clerk, did we have any notices or requests to speak for items not on the agenda?
We did not receive any written comments for items not on the agenda, and nor do I see any hands raised at the moment.
All right, well, then go ahead and close this section and move on to our next section, which is additions and revisions to the agenda. Are there any additions or revisions?
No, sir.
All right. Then we will move on, and the next item is our consent calendar, and we do have 2 items on our consent calendar. Is there anyone that wishes to speak on the consent calendar or ask for an item to be pulled for further discussion? All right, seeing none, I'll ask, is there a motion on the consent calendar?
Calamasa moves.
Colonies moved approval.
Beaumont second.
Beaumont seconds. Any other discussion? And I'll ask for a roll call vote, please.
Beaumont.
Yes.
Calamasa.
Yes.
Canyon Lake.
Aye.
Cathedral City.
Yes.
Coachella.
Yes.
Lake Elsinore.
Aye.
Palm Desert.
Yes.
Palm Springs.
Aye.
Riverside.
Yes.
Wildemar.
Yes.
Thank you. The consent calendar passes.
All right, thank you very much. Now we will move on to our next item, item 7, which is the proposed budget for fiscal year 22-23. It is that time again to start into the budget process, and presenting today will be Michelle Cisneros.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Chair and committee members. I'm Michelle Cisneros. I'm the Deputy Director of Finance, and I will be filling in for Sergio Vidal this morning. Today's presentation is going to outline the Commission's initial draft of our fiscal year 23 budget. I will review our budget process and the considerations that were put into this budget, and I will look to you for input. Next slide, please. Excuse me. So this morning, we will review the Commission's fiscal year 23 budget at a high level, including some assumptions, revenue and expenditure comparisons, as well as some key capital projects for the upcoming year. Next slide, please. The Commission's budget process involves several important steps. In December, we began the budget development by preparing revenue projections. And in January and February, we updated the Commission and department goals and objectives. Since early March, the Finance Department has been compiling our budget data that was submitted by all of our departments, and we will continue to analyze various pieces of this budget. The results of our initial effort is the executive summary that is being presented to you today. Today, we're seeking your input on the proposed budget, and we will bring the final and complete budget document to the Commission in June, at the June 8th, for the closing of the public hearing and the budget adoption, which is required by June 15th of each year. Next slide, please. The Commission's practice has been to accumulate revenues for specific projects and programs, since we do have the flexibility to adjust our project development. With lean staffing relative to the required tasks and demands, the Commission outsources a significant portion of our work to various consultants. The revenue projections approved by the Commission in January for Measure A and Local Transportation Fund sales tax revenues, as well as TUMF revenues, are included in this preliminary budget. The projections assume that our sales taxes and our TUMF revenues increases of 2% and 3% respectively. Our revenue projections are based on economic data that is currently available, analysis that was provided by the Commission's sales tax consultant, as well as current market conditions. The projections reflect staff's cautious but optimistic outlook in the near future. Despite the COVID-19 pandemic and its impacts over the last 2 years, our sales tax revenues in Riverside County have performed better than we had anticipated. Staff will continue to analyze the economic indicators, such as the rise in interest rates, increase in home prices for the region, as well as events that may impact the region's purchasing power. Staff anticipates that more frequent reviews throughout the upcoming fiscal year as we look at the impacts that will become more widely known to us. Based on the current revenue projections, reserves will be used for some of our capital projects as well as transit operator needs. Next slide, please. So staff anticipates the beginning of the new fiscal year with a $1.3 billion in fund balance. Fiscal year 23 estimated sources are budgeted at $1 billion and estimated uses at $1.1 billion. The budget anticipates uses will exceed sources by about $109 million, resulting in the use of project and program fund balance reserves, which are primarily for the 1591 Express Lanes Connector, the 91 Corridor Operations Project, the 91 Corridor Operation Project, the Lake Elsinore 15 Railroad Canyon, the Mid-County Parkway, including the 215 Placentia Interchange and its mitigation project, the completion of the 60 truck lanes, the closeout of the 91 project, Coachella Valley Measure A Highway and regional arterial projects, and various transit and specialized transportation projects, which will be using LTF, STA, and Measure A funds. Of the $1.2 billion projected ending fund balance, 99.5% is restricted for specific projects and programs that are funded by Measure A, TDA, TUMF, motorist assistance, and toll operations. The remaining 0.5% is assigned for motorist or for management services, excuse me. Next slide, please. The Commission's revenues come from several different sources, but they're primarily from our sales tax revenues and federal and state reimbursements. The sales tax revenue projections that were approved by the commission in January assumed a 2% increase from the fiscal year 22 projections, resulting in $255 million for Measure A and $130 million for LTF in fiscal year 23. The Measure A revenues represent about 24% of the annual sources and are distributed to the 3 geographic areas. Western County will receive about $204 million or 80%. Coachella Valley will receive about $50 million or 19%. And Palo Verde Valley will receive about $1.2 million or 1%. The LTF revenues represent about 12%, and STA revenues represent 3% of our total sources. The intergovernmental revenues at 24% consist primarily of federal and state reimbursements for project costs that will tend to vary with project activity. And some of those significant projects include the 7191 connector, the 15 Express Lanes Southern Extension, the 1591 Express Lanes connector, the Mid-County Parkway 215 Placentia interchange and its second construction project, the 60 truck lanes, some smart freeway projects, the Harupa and McKinley Avenue grade separation projects, and rail station rehabilitation and improvements. Our TUMF revenues represent about 3% of our total sources. Our estimated tolls, penalties, and fees at 9% of our total sources includes the 91 Express Lanes revenues at $64 million for the 6th full year of operations and $33.7 million for the 2nd full year of the 15 Express Lanes operations. Our other revenues and investment income account for less than 1% of our total sources, and our interest rates are low, so our interest income is expected to be minimal. Our transfers in are about 24% of sources, and they're primarily for debt service funding, completion of the 15 Express Lanes project, the 1591 Express Lanes connector, the Hamner Bridge widening, the Mid-County Parkway 215 Placentia interchange, the rail maintenance and operations, as well as administrative cost allocation. Next slide, please. This chart is showing the comparison of all commission sources. Many of the fiscal year 23 revenues are relatively flat compared to fiscal year 22, with the exception of intergovernmental reimbursements, transfers in, and debt proceeds. Our intergovernmental reimbursements will vary with project activity, and they are lower by about 27%, primarily due to the near completion of the 60 truck lanes, the 91 corridor operations project, the Mid-County Parkway 215 Placentia interchange, as well as some reimbursements for the SB 132 funding for the 1591 Express Lanes connector and the Harupa and McKinley Avenue grade separation projects. Again, our transfers in are higher by about 23%, and this is primarily due to the funding for the completion of the 15 Express Lanes project with debt proceeds, the 1591 Express Lanes connector with surplus toll revenues, the Hamner Bridge widening, the Mid-County Parkway Placentia interchange, rail maintenance and operations, and the administrative cost allocation. Our debt proceeds are lower by 100%, and this is due to the refinancing of the 91 Express Lanes toll debt in the 2nd quarter of fiscal year 22. Staff does not anticipate the need for the issuance of debt proceeds in fiscal year 23 at this time. Any adjustments to our fiscal year 23 projections can be made in the next few weeks, and we will reflect it in the final budget presented to the commission in June. Next slide, please. So this table is showing the commission's program operations and capital project uses by department. In a couple of slides, I'll highlight some of the capital highway, rail, and regional arterial projects included in the budget. Our capital local streets and roads expenditures are the Measure A sales tax revenues that are returned to the local jurisdictions, and they're relatively flat. Commuter assistance reflects a slight decrease of 3% due to the restructuring of the rideshare van pool platforms. Our debt service reflects a decrease of about 88% due to the refinancing of the 91 Express Lanes toll debt in the 2nd quarter of this fiscal year. Our management services has increased about 9%, and this is primarily due to 3 new positions to maintain service levels, as well as a robust communication and engagement efforts and equipment upgrades and maintenance. Motorist assistance has increased about 5% for commuter assistance special projects and FSP program transfers. Our planning and programming has increased about 12% due to the projects and operations activities in connection with the LTF disbursements, other district projects that are 100% reimbursable, and funding for some special studies. Our public and specialized transit reflects about a 35% increase and is primarily due to decreased operating subsidy needs resulting from available COVID relief funding that was in the previous fiscal year. Our rail maintenance and operations has also increased about 28% due to decreased operating subsidy needs that was resulting from available COVID relief funding for Metrolink operations in the previous fiscal year as well. And our regional conservation has increased about 79%. And this is due to the Commission's finance department assuming the accounts payable invoice processing responsibility for RCA. The Commission will be reimbursed 100% of the costs incurred. But additionally, the budget also includes the addition of one new position for a regional conservation deputy director. I apologize, there's some construction going up above the office, so I'm not sure if you're hearing that drilling going on, but I apologize. The Commission also became the managing agency for the RCA in January of 2021. Toll operations reflects a 75% increase due to the required repair and rehabilitation activity and operations on the 91 express lanes toll express lanes, as well as the use of surplus toll revenues for the 1591 express lanes connector project. Next slide, please. This chart shows the significance of the Commission's primary project-driven environment as reflected in the capital highway, rail, regional arterial category, and represents about 47% of the total budget. The capital local streets and roads, which is the Measure A sales tax revenue return to the local jurisdictions, represents about 7% of the total budget. Our debt service reflects principal and interest due on the Measure A sales tax revenue bonds and interest due on the 91 express lanes toll debt, and it represents about 8% of the fiscal year 23 budget. Debt service on the 15 express lanes TIFIA loan does not begin until fiscal year 26. Commuter assistance, management services, motorist assistance, planning and programming, and regional conservation are a very small percentage of the total expenditures, and together they only represent 5% of the budget. Our public and specialized transit represents about 17% of the operating and capital subsidies to the public transit operators. Our rail maintenance and operations at 5% of the total budget includes operating subsidies to Metrolink and for rail station maintenance. Our toll operations for the RCTC 91 express lanes and the 15 express lanes are 11% of the budget. And the budget includes operations for both express lanes as well as the repair and rehabilitation work that is needed on the 91 express lanes and the use of the 91 express lanes surplus toll revenues for the 1591 express lanes connector project. The next slide, please. Some of our significant capital projects identified in fiscal year 23 include the construction and design build activities for the 1591 express lanes connector, funded primarily by the 91 express lanes surplus toll revenues as approved by the Commission in March of 2020. Engineering activities for the 1591 express lanes southern extensions and the 15 corridor operations projects. The continue activities for to complete the 15 express lanes project. We're going to wrap up some of various activities on the 91 project, which is primarily related to right-of-way activities and some construction on the 91 corridor operations project. Some engineering, construction, and right-of-way activities on the Mid-County Parkway 215 Placentia interchange and its second construction project. some engineering, construction, and right-of-way activities on the 7191 connector project. And some other capital projects include the completion of the 60 truck lanes, the Harupa McKinley Avenue grade separation projects, as well as smart freeway projects and various rail and regional arterial projects. Next slide, please. So this table is presenting the commission's expenditures by function, whereas the previous slides had focused on the department level. The $1.1 million or 7% increase in salaries and benefits is related to the addition of 4 new positions. These include an accountant, an administrative assistant, a human resources assistant, and a regional conservation deputy director, as well as an increase to the commission's contribution to employee health benefits and a 4% pull for performance merit-based salary increases. Our professional services are expected to decrease by about 8%, and this is due to the completion of a pilot project alternative analysis, refocusing some rail operations planning efforts, the change in the hosting of the regional rideshare van pool system platforms, as well as a decrease in our general legal services. Our support costs decreased about 7%, our support costs have increased about 7%. And this is primarily due to the support and maintenance of toll operations, some general business insurance, and the commission assuming the accounts payable invoice responsibility for RCA, which is 100% reimbursable. Some of our projects and operations will decrease about 3%. And this is based on activities that I had noted in the previous slide. And note that this category will vary significantly from year to year, and this is based on project activity or project funding. Our debt service will decrease significantly due to the refinancing of the 91 Express Lanes toll debt in the second quarter of this fiscal year. And our capital outlay decreased about 22% for station rehabilitation projects that are near completion in this fiscal year. Next slide, please. This chart is showing you that our projects and operations, as well as debt service, are the largest functional expenditure groups. This chart is illustrating that the commission's core project-driven environment with an operations component that is related to the 91 and 15 express lanes. It's important to reiterate that the primary sources to fund these projects and operation costs come from new revenues such as sales taxes, federal and state reimbursements, project fund balance reserves, and transfers from debt proceeds. Next slide, please. So this budget is still a work in progress, and the final budget will be presented to the commission in June and will reflect any necessary adjustments based on our continued analysis. We will also continue to monitor all of our revenue trends, project reimbursements from federal and state agencies. The fiscal year 23 budget reflects that we will be below the 1% Measure A cap on management services, salaries, and benefits at 0.73%. Additionally, in regard to the board adopted policy limiting total management services costs to 4%, we're projecting those costs to be at 1.86%. So we're looking to gather input on this proposed budget today and at the public meeting in May. So we will finalize our budget for the June commission meeting with the closing of the public hearing and adopting the final budget. So this does conclude my presentation, and I do look to you for any input. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michelle Cisneros, for that thorough presentation. I will turn it over to the commission. Any questions or comments before public comment? Wow. All right. Well, I have a couple of questions. So, okay. So I noticed going through the entire presentation in the agenda, there's the 4% increase, and in some places it says it's for the consumer price index increase, and other places it says it's for cost of living. So, for example, on page 11 of the presentation, which is page 25 of your agenda, if you have it, there's some bullet points at the bottom, and it talks about the 4% pull for merit-based, and then it says a 4% annual consumer price index salary range adjustment for fiscal year 22-23. So then, of course, that begs the question, well, which consumer price index are we using? Are we taking out energy and food, or which region are we using national? But I don't think, after I read the rest of the presentation, I think that really is meant to be a cost of living adjustment, which typically decision makers use a variety of consumer price index adjustments to make that. In fact, on page 22 of the packet, or page 22 of the item, or page 32 of the agenda packet, does talk about annual salary range cost of living adjustment. So they're not quite the same. One is typically based on the other one. So I was wondering if we could clarify what exactly that is.
Okay, I will go ahead and take that. So first off, related to the salary range adjustment by CPI, the commission adopted a policy several years ago that annually on July 1st, with each new budget year, that the commission's salary ranges would be adjusted by CPI for the area that covers Riverside County. And the reason I'm being generic with that is that sometimes the Bureau of Labor Statistics changes which region we're in. I think right now it's Riverside, San Bernardino, Ontario. So whichever Bureau of Labor Statistics region incorporates the entirety of Riverside County, the policy is that the salary ranges are adjusted by that CPI. Now, the policy that was adopted also capped that adjustment annually at 4%. In the years past, our salary ranges have shifted maybe 1% or 1.25%. This year, CPI for the Riverside area is at 6.8%. So it's a very significant CPI for our region, but our policy caps it at 4%.
Nice.
So this salary range adjustment is not a cost of living adjustment to everyone's salary. All this means is that our salary ranges themselves just shift by that 4%. And by shift, I mean they increase by 4%. We have, I don't remember the exact number. The only employees who will see any kind of adjustment from that CPI salary range adjustment are any employees who are at the very bottom of the range. So if the range moves up and someone, we always have to pay people within their range. So if their current salary is below the new minimum of the salary range, then they have to get that adjustment so that they're paid within the range. So other than that, this is not an automatic adjustment in anyone's salary. It's just shifting the range itself. My hope would be next year that we're not going to see this kind of CPI occurring. But again, the commission policy caps it at 4%. So that's the CPI adjustment to the salary ranges. We also have a 4% merit pool recommended, and that is a performance-based merit process, which we've always had a performance-based process where annually every employee, their performance is reviewed. We have a set format with a scoring system, and employees will receive between 0 and 4% adjustment. We don't do automatic step increases for employees. Any pay adjustment they have is earned either through their merit adjustment annually or through promotion. So I hope so it's by coincidence that both of those numbers this year are 4%.
Well, and I'm so glad I asked, because and I think maybe, well, first of all, I think maybe it should say the same thing in the two different places, so that it's not referring it to as a COLA in one place and a CPI on the other place. I also think maybe, or would it suggest that maybe a short explanation be included in this document, because to me it shows that
Okay.
the commission is using restraint, or it's being restrained by its policy that it's adopted, limiting that to 4%, where some might say, well, it looks like a lot, but
Okay.
it's not, but some might say that. And I think that if really the staff and the commission deserves some type of recognition that we have a very restrained policy in place for that. So I think that's excellent. And I also appreciate your explanation about no automatic bumps on the except for people at the very bottom of the ranges. So I think that's very important. So
Okay, thank you. We'll modify the staff report to make that clear. Thank you.
thank you so much. And then I have another question, and this has been a question I've had off and on. There's the mention of the policy threshold of 4% of Measure A revenues for management services, and then a 1% cap for that's salaries and benefits. But when I look at I know it's got to be that things are mixed in together, because when you look at the actual numbers, like for next year, of a Measure A revenue budget of 255 million, 1% of that would be about almost 2.6 million, 2.55 million. But of course, management services are far above that, or even salaries and benefits is well above that. And the one's 24.7 million, the other one's 17.4 million. So that tells me that when I'm looking at those figures, it's not just those supported by Measure A, but it's got to be a lot of other salaries and benefits and management service activities that are supported by things other than Measure A. But I don't see it broken out anywhere, so I can't make the math match up. Am I seeing that wrong, or is that just an amalgamation then?
No, I don't necessarily think you're seeing it wrong. It's just the way all the different tables are presented. They kind of slice and dice the information. The table that's presented in the PowerPoint presentation includes items such as debt service, contributions towards debt service, and that's about 10 million that you need to take that off because Measure A is not part of that, comes from a different funding source, which is already Measure A. So that's not included as part of the cap, if you will. So it's not that you're seeing it wrong. It's just the way the information is presented in both the executive summary and as the PowerPoint presentation. But I can certainly give you a detailed outline of what makes up the management services and how those percentages are arrived.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful. I'm not trying to add complexity to something that's already kind of complex, but when we're noting that we're observing certain limits from Measure A sales tax revenues of a certain percentage, but then it's not. But when you look at the total, though, for salaries and benefits for management services, it's of course much more. So is there some notation where it could say that it's of the like for salaries and benefits, it's of the certain amount, the certain percentage, and that's of the amount that's supported by Measure A activities, and maybe give what that is without it necessarily having to break down what every position, because I'm sure that's what you have to do internally. You have to say how much of the executive director is spent on Measure A activities, how much of the every position. So I don't know if we need that complexity in the summary, but it's just a little hard for me to make the numbers mesh out with what we have.
Sure, I can certainly add something in the executive summary as well as in the PowerPoint presentation.
All right, Anne, did you have more?
Sure, just to add in the 1%, as a reminder, the 1% cap is actually in statute. So we are required to have 1% administrative overhead related to our sales tax measure. And that is very common across the state with other sales tax measures as well. It's to ensure that we focus the money on projects, programs, and services. So that 1%, we do everything we can to obtain other funding sources. So we do not have significant staff or overhead costs assigned to Measure A. But just a reminder that the 1% is in statute, which is why we pay very, very close attention to it.
Yes, and I'm glad it's always noted. I'm just trying to wrap my head around it. So thank you so much, and thank you again, Michelle and Ann, and everyone involved, Sergio, in this process, because I know it's a very involved process. So, all right, are there any other commission questions or comments? How about public comments, clerk?
We did not receive any written comments on this item, and I'm not seeing any hands raised.
All right, it's been noted that we would be asking for a vote, just a vote on the recommendation, or a motion and vote on the recommendation to forward this to the commission, who would then hold a public hearing and gather additional input. So can I have that kind of a motion?
Springs move to approve.
Wildemar, second.
Wildemar seconds. Any other discussion? I'll ask for a roll call vote, please.
Beaumont,
Yes.
Calamasa,
Yes.
Canyon Lake,
Aye.
Cathedral City,
Yes.
Coachella,
Yes.
Lake Elsinore,
Aye.
Palm Desert,
Yes.
Palm Springs,
Aye.
Riverside,
Very thorough briefing. I vote yes.
Wildemar.
Yes.
Thank you. Item 7 passes.
All right, thank you so much. Moving on with our agenda, item number 8 is the adopted 2022 State Transportation Improvement Program, also known as STIP. And it looks like we have Jillian Guidazzo that will be presenting. I hope I didn't mess that up too bad.
That's okay. Good morning, Chair Gregory and committee members. I'm Jillian Gazzado, the Planning and Programming Director at RCTC. And we've already got the PowerPoint pulled up, so I'll get started. The State Transportation Improvement Program, known as STIP, is administered by the California Transportation Commission, or CTC, and is adopted biennially. At RCTC's October 2021 Commission meeting, the 2022 STIP Program of Projects for Riverside County was approved. Staff subsequently submitted our STIP package to the CTC by the December 15th, 2021 deadline. Next slide, please. Because the STIP is required to be financially constrained, meaning funding is not committed beyond what is anticipated to be available, CTC staff must analyze the cumulative STIP submittals from all counties in the state and recommend adjustments to programming years, or even suggest deprogramming projects to maintain financial constraint. Fortunately, requests for 2022 STIP programming were $50 million under the fund balance amount, so no deprogramming was necessary this cycle. However, because there is only new STIP funding capacity in the later years of the STIP, fiscal years 2025-26 and 2026-27, some programming requests for the earlier years had to be pushed out. This is done by CTC staff reaching out to the regions to explain how they propose to move programming on certain projects. The CTC adopted the 2022 STIP at the March 16th, 2022 meeting. Next slide. The CTC needed to make 2 changes to the programming the Commission approved at its October 2021 meeting, which are illustrated toward the bottom of the table on the screen for the CV Rail project and for Planning, Programming, and Monitoring, or PPM. For CV Rail, we proposed programming 2022 STIP funds in fiscal year 2023-24, knowing there was not capacity in that year for our project, but just in case an already programmed project in that year got removed, advanced, or delayed. Unfortunately, that was not the case, so CTC needed to push the programming on this project to fiscal year 2025-26 when there is anticipated to be STIP funding available. There will be another STIP cycle the second half of 2023, where this can be revisited and options explored to potentially advance the project sooner than fiscal year 2025-26 and be repaid later. Note that we originally proposed programming funds in 2023-24 as the Tier 1 environmental document is anticipated to be finalized later this summer. For PPM, a small amount of funds were proposed in fiscal year 2027-28, but each STIP cycle is only a 5-year document, so the PPM funds needed to be brought into the 5-year program. As such, $319,000 was added to the $200,000 already proposed for programming in fiscal year 2026-27. And I'd like to call out a couple of errors that I made in my staff report. Those are in the total row of table 1 on page 37 of the agenda. This will be corrected if the item is forwarded to the commission for final receipt. The numbers on this screen are correct, though. Next slide, please. Here's a visual representation of the projects approved by the CTC for 2022 STIP funding in Riverside County. Generally going from west to east, we have $13 million programmed for the construction phase of the County of Riverside's Temescal Canyon Road project, $14.7 million for the construction of Banning and Beaumont's I-10 Highland Springs Interchange project, which the commission is currently the lead agency on, $15.6 million on CV Rail for the Tier 2 environmental document, $7.5 million was programmed for construction of the I-10 Monroe Street interchange as nominated by CVAG. The project is in Indio and is being led by the county. $2 million was deprogrammed from the I-10 Avenue 50 interchange as directed by the CVAG Executive Committee, and $1 million was programmed for PPM. Next slide. This concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Guizzato, for that presentation. Commissioners, any questions or comments? I don't see any. And I was hoping maybe you would comment on what this means as far as how projects will come out of in the flow, and how this the timing may be affected by this.
Okay, sure. So first off, I wanted to thank Jillian and her team for being really creative this STIP cycle, in that we asked for a lot more money than what our target, which was provided by the CTC. Usually the CTC tells us how much we should target to ask for. They also give us a maximum we can ask for. We always usually aim for the target, just because usually there's not enough money. But this year we were really aggressive in asking for the maximum amount, and it worked. So we did maximize the amount of money coming to Riverside. I think on the CV Rail side, having them push it out a couple of years. We also, Caltrans also asked for $10 million in the Interregional Transportation Improvement Program. So we're fortunate we have that. We're still trying to cobble together all of the money for CV Rail Tier 2. So I think once we see the results of the federal requests that we've made, then we'll try to come up with a plan for how we can advance the project and perhaps seek reimbursement from the CTC later. So there's a couple of mechanisms that may or may not be available to us to advance some of the work. So, we may have to be creative with how we keep that project moving forward until we can get state reimbursement. But the fact that that money is sitting out there in 25, 26 is actually a good thing that we actually got it programmed. It's also not uncommon for other projects around the state to slip. So we can also be aggressive in asking for our projects to be advanced. So I know I'm giving Jillian a whole lot more aggressive actions to try to take to move the projects forward. But overall, this is a really good news story for us, that our construction projects have all stayed on track and nothing has been shifted out from a construction standpoint. And we were able to get the CV Rail a really significant chunk of money for CV Rail. So good news all around on the state front. What we're also not sure of is what may happen over the next couple of months with the state budget, and whether or not there will be additional transportation dollars in the state budget as a one-time infusion of additional funding into these programs. So I think we're positioned well. If additional money comes in, it might give us the ability to advance.
Thank you very much. Yeah, that helps frame it more as a victory than when you see that some of it's cut. It makes it look like maybe it wasn't, but yes, thank you for framing that and giving us a perspective. All right, commissioners, any questions, comments? How about any public comments? Any public comments?
We did not receive any written comments on this item, and I'm not seeing any hands raised.
Thank you so much. All right, this is a receive and file at this point, and it will be forwarded to the commission for final action. So we'll go ahead and move on then to our next item, item 9, state and federal legislative update. David Knudsen.
Yes, good morning, Chair and committee members. I'm pleased to be with you this morning. The item before you today is a recommendation to take positions on 2 bills. One that continues the march toward shifting local decision-making authority to advance the state's climate goals, and another that provides a thoughtful fix to the one-size-fits-all nature of the state's VMT mitigation requirements. The first bill is AB 2237, authored by Assembly Transportation Committee Chair Laura Friedman. AB 2237 would prohibit a regional transportation planning agency or county transportation commission from funding projects in a regional transportation improvement program not aligned with the state's climate goals. It appears if a project is found to be inconsistent, a regional agency would be prohibited from funding that project, regardless of the fund source, even local funds. AB 2237 would change the existing processes and remove discretion from regional agencies in the selection of projects, despite efforts already being done to ensure consistency with regional plans and state climate goals. In order to implement the changes, AB 2237 would first require the Strategic Growth Council, in consultation with CARB, the Department of Housing and Community Development, and the California State Transportation Agency, to convene a task force to review the roles and responsibilities of MPOs. Ironically, the bill does not include MPOs, regional transportation agencies, or local governments in this task force, nor does it define a scope for the discussions to understand the goals or the desired outcomes. This is yet another example of the desire by some in the legislature to shift transportation decision-making away from local control. Therefore, staff is recommending that the commission oppose this bill. Taking this position is consistent with the commission's adopted 2022 state and federal legislative platform, including in the area of maintaining the commission's regional control. The next bill is Senate Bill 1410, authored by Senator Ana Caballero, with Senator Richard Roth as a co-author. This bill would modify CEQA's vehicle miles traveled regulations to limit mitigation requirements for housing developments to those in transit priority areas. A transit priority area is an area within a 1 mile of a major transit stop. In areas outside of transit priority areas, level of service would be used to assess impacts on the environment for projects subject to CEQA review. As you may recall, Caltrans eliminated the level of service model in 2020, instead favoring a new VMT regulation with a zero increase VMT approach when considering projects for approval. SB 1410 seeks to differentiate between transportation needs for infill development, those of transit corridors in urban or transit priority areas, and projects for communities outside urban centers. Supporting this legislation is consistent with the Commission's adopted 2022 state and federal legislative platform, where the Commission supports the simplification of VMT modeling and analysis, and state policies should be implemented recognizing regional variance by distinguishing high growth regions for their impact on the economy, the environment, and should be dynamic in order to address future population growth. The recommendation before you today is to oppose AB 2237 and support SB 1410. This concludes my report. I'm happy to take any questions.
All right, thank you for that presentation. Commissioners, any questions or comments? How about public comment?
We did not receive any written public comments regarding this item, nor do I see any hands raised.
All right, well, this is an update item, but we're also being asked to take some positions. Commissioner Harnick.
Thank you. I do want to share with you that at the SCAG Legislative Committee meeting, we discussed the Bill 1410, and it was a very good discussion. And we came away with, from that committee, to recommend to the Regional Council to support this as well.
All right, thank you very much. Any other comments? All right, so we are being asked to take the position, an opposed position on AB 2237 and a support position on SB 1410. Do I have a motion or other discussion on that?
Springs moves both motions.
Riverside,
Palm Springs moving, Riverside second. Any other discussion? I'll ask for a roll call vote, please.
Beaumont,
Yes.
Calamasa,
Yes.
Canyon Lake,
Aye.
Cathedral City,
Yes.
Coachella, Lake Elsinore,
Aye.
Palm Desert,
Yes.
Palm Springs.
Aye.
Riverside,
aye.
Wildemar.
Aye.
Thank you. Item 9 passes.
Thank you so much. All right, item 10 is items pulled. We didn't have any. And item 11 is the executive director's report and mayor.
Okay, thank you. Very quickly, we had a great event out in Lake Elsinore last Thursday to celebrate the opening of the Railroad Canyon Interchange. Commissioner McGee was outstanding in his role as the MC. So congratulations, sir. It was a really nice event. And it was really fun, I must admit, to celebrate a project opening in person. So that was really terrific. And then finally, next month's meeting on May 23rd is in person in the board chambers. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Okay, and the next item is commissioner comments. Commissioners, do you have any brief announcements or comments of interest to the commission? All right, well, seeing none, next item is adjournment. Thank you, everyone, for attending and for your time and attention. And our next meeting is scheduled to be held on May 23rd. And as reported, that would be in person. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Adjourned.
Bye-bye.